Hello everyone, Reza here. Welcome to another Marvelous Designer for Beginners series video. In this one, we are going to focus on a Henley shirt or a t-shirt and how to make that inside Marvelous Designer. Let's get started. As usual, I'm going to start with my references. So this is a type of look that I would like to achieve inside Marvelous Designer. You can see more or less the design is the same, especially around the neck. So it's a Henley shirt. It's a colorless pullover shirt. It's basically a colorless polo shirt. And we have 3, 4, or in some of these cases, more buttons. So we've got more buttons here, 3 in here, 4 in here, but more or less the design is the same. You can see it's very much fit, close to the body type of fabric. It's not too silky, yet it's not too thick. So the material, you need to kind of think about what type of material you would like to assign, and as a result of that, what type of wrinkles you're going to get on the shirt. So you can see the upper body is almost wrinkleless, and the bottom half of the shirt is where we get few wrinkles. Quite an interesting type of shirt. I actually own one, and it's one of my favorite types of shirt, these Henley t-shirts. So let's see how we can create those inside Marvelous Designer. It's going to be a really fun topic, so let's switch back to Marvelous Designer and get started. Alright, here we are inside Marvelous Designer, and we have our male avatar ready to go. So let's get to it. I'm going to start with a rectangle. I'm going to work on one side and then unfold it to the other side and then mirror paste it to get the back panel. All right, maybe something like this. I'm going to use the shadow map here. I already have a fabric with the blue color sort of, and there is no preset yet. So we are going to figure that out together. I'm going to go into edit point and just insert a point. Going to edit pattern and push that top in here in, and maybe I need a v-neck in here. So I need to go to edit point, right click on the segment, uniform split, set to 2. So it gives me a point right in the middle of the segment. Hopefully you all comfortable with those tools. It's going to edit pattern and push this down, holding down shift to create our v-neck. Now I need to give this sleeve part a little bit of curvature. So let's do that. Edit curvature, move that here. And that's one of the reasons I'm actually working on one panel instead of 2 at the same time, because matching those curves can be a little bit difficult. So why not making one and just duplicate it to the other side? That's good. I'm going to go and select the whole thing, make them just a tad bigger. That's good. We are going to control the amount of tension with the tension map and strain map that we have in Marvelous Designer, but for now I think that is loose enough to be attached to the body with no problem. To unfold, you're going to go to edit pattern, select the middle line, and then right click on it and go unfold, and then you have the exact same patch on the other side. Excellent. So this looks good to me. Probably the only change I want to make is to get rid of this point right here and move this down ever so slightly. And why not giving the this area, the v-neck area, a slight touch of curve as well, just a tad. All right, that should do it. I'm going to symmetry paste it. So copy, mirror paste. I said symmetry. It's better to do mirror. And now it's time to kind of flip it and move it to the other side, the back panel. But well, we have arrangement points. So why don't we use our arrangement points? I'm just going to move this panel forward and snap it to the arrangement point, select the bat panel and assign it to the back arrangement point. Well, the power of arrangement points, you already know that. Hopefully you all have watched that video. That should do the trick. I can just go ahead and turn off the arrangement points and let's sew the whole thing right now. I can use 3D sewing, 3D segment sewing, makes it really quick. Visually, it's very, very clear. So select this one to this one, segment sew this bit to this bit and this bit to this panel. Now you can do it in 2D pattern window, you can do it in 3D pattern window. It doesn't really make much of a difference. Now I noticed that this fabric is a little bit too reflective, so I'm going to go and set this one to maybe 45, maybe 48. I don't want this to be too reflective. It's not satin. So yeah, that should do the trick. I can even go ahead here and slightly change the coloration. Another improvement is particle distance. I can go and set the particle distance to something like 15, get a slightly better resolution from the start. And the back panel, I noticed that has got V-neck as well, which is not really the case in all the V-necks. I'm gonna go and give this an arc instead, something like that, and let's simulate. All right, good result from the get-go. I'm quite happy with it. One minor improvement, if we can call it that, is to go in here. I'm just gonna stop the simulation and go to the pattern and probably just get these guys slightly closer to each other. I think the V-neck is a bit too high, so I'm just going to move this up ever so slightly. Yep, that's better. I'm going to look at the strain map as well. So just to check the pressure points, I'm going to go in here, strain map. It's not too bad actually. So at any point of time, if you feel like there's a bit of a pressure going on, you can definitely fix it now before you attach the sleeves. So I can move these areas higher, that's for sure. And these are the things that you can read from pressure map, which is quite useful. So I can kind of move this up ever so slightly. And let's just move these guys and widen them just a little bit to alleviate a little bit of pressure. Let's see how we go. Yep, definitely it's working much better. I can go even one more. Again, all these compromises you can do after you attach the sleeve, but again, because it will change, or it may change, the length of these curved areas, it's better to do this before. Now keep that in mind, that you really don't need to get blue or green all across. Having a little bit of tightness around the neck is actually a good thing. After all, the reference that we're getting is actually pretty tight, so you don't want to make it too loose. You don't want to make it like a button casual Hawaiian shirt. So keep that in mind. But it's always good to kind of keep an eye on the amount of pressure points that you have and kind of adjust your style based on that. All right, I think it would be a good time for me to save the scene, and in the next video I'm going to attach the sleeves. In the meantime, I can go and just ever so slightly darken the shirt as well and increase the roughness a little bit. Yep, that looks good to me. Let's go to the next chapter. There are many different methods to add sleeves to your shirt, long sleeves, short sleeves. It really doesn't matter. That's a really fun part of working with Marvelous Designer. You can actually think about pattern making ideas, and I've seen so many artists actually bring tailor 2D patterns, actual patterns into Marvelous Designer, try to kind of copy the lines and trace over the lines. That's one way of doing it. And there are a variety of methods to do that. The way that I kind of handle this adding sleeve scenario is very, very simple. I start with a normal rectangle and try to work out what number works best for me. And after that, it's a simple segment sewing and we're pretty much done. So let's see how we can tackle that. So I'm just going to do a rectangle. Now this bit is going to be the length of the sleeve, where I can at any point of time turn it to a long sleeve and short sleeve. And this length, if I just highlight it, needs to have a certain length to kind of cater for the sleeve joints. So if I click here, half of this needs to wrap around this area and the other half needs to wrap around this area. So we have this arc and we have, if I select it here, and we have this one, and if I select both and you get the number right underneath the cursor, it says 470 almost 8. So 478 needs to be the number here. You can see it's not that number. So what I usually do, I either right click on it and go change length 478, and you can see it is changing it, holding down shift, moving that one also. So that's one way of doing it, to kind of work out how long this piece should be. But the reality is you cannot have a flat surface. You have to have a little bit of arc. Now that arc sometimes in the form of a sinus curve, and sometimes it's just a normal bulging out of this rectangle. It really comes down to different scenarios and the complexity of your garment. Now, if I have this 478 and start adding arc to it, it is going to actually add to the existing length, and the sleeve is going to have some redundant fabric. It's going to be too loose, it will look odd. So what I usually do, I try to be mindful of 478, but I make this one just a little bit shorter, so when I add the arc I can actually reach that level. So I'm going to go edit curvature and think about, all right, what do I want? 478, and a ballpark will do. You don't need to be super accurate with it. 477, that will get the job done for us. 478, 480, 478, we have a winner. So that's it's as simple as that. That's how I approach this. And then you need to kind of work out what area goes to where. Now, in order to place this patch into a right position, obviously one way of doing this is just to go in here and do a lot of rotation and translation. Another one is, of course, to use, yep, you guessed it right, arrangement points. So all I need to do in here is just to click on the arrangement points and see how quickly it will bring it into position. The only problem is this time it brought it into position and it's kind of upside down. So this curve need to be here, and that's something kind of you need to be mindful of. I'm going to rotate it and another round of rotation, and now we're talking. So moving this and down a little bit. Now the way I do it, I try to stitch these two parts first and simulate, and then fill the gap underneath, and only then you can symmetry paste that to the other side. Hope it makes sense. Let's put that into practice and see how easy that is. Now it's time to sew them all together. To sew that, because we have two separate fabrics, obviously we need to separate this line, right? Well, it's very easy. We know how to do it. Add point split, select this point, and then I'm going to go to add point right click on it, uniform split, and there I have my point here. Now it's easy, I can just connect this to here and this to here. You can do it in 2D, or I'm more of a visual person and I can do it in 3D. So here to here, I'm just going to zoom in, here to here, and here to here. Simple as that. I'm gonna let it simulate and press spacebar, and then I can easily close the gap. Here to here, done. If I bring the sleeve, you can see it works beautifully. Now this method is very simple. At the same time, I never had a problem with it. It's just very, very solid. So I thought I would just share this with you in case if you want to use it. I can stop the simulation now. My computer doesn't need to run for no reason. Now with that, let's just symmetry paste this. Oh, I'm still selecting segment sewing here. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to symmetry pattern with sewing, which is Control D, moving it to the other side. The good thing about symmetry is it kind of brings it with its original shape. You really don't need to form it. You already have that form already. Probably don't need the arrangement points now. I can turn it off. Now let's segment sew this piece as well. We already know what to do. So doing it 2D or 3D really doesn't matter. Here to here and here to here. I'm gonna let it simulate and then spacebar to stop the simulation. And I can just close the gap, but the gap is already been closed because I did symmetry pattern with sewing. So that is it for sleeves. Again, if you have GeoInner penetration somewhere here, you can easily fix that. The good thing about this method is it's very, very flexible. Let's say you want to have a much tighter sleeves, because I'm looking at my reference and the sleeves are fairly tight around the forearm. So we can easily achieve that by just pulling these points in. So 2 units here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2 units here. You may want to have a slightly shorter one, so going 1 unit up, going 1 unit up. And another thing you can do to improve on the situation is to lower the particle distance to something like 13 and then simulate. How cool is that? I can go even here into strain map, and you can see we have a little bit of pressure. That's exactly what we wanted. We have a little bit of pressure around the neck, which is exactly the style asks for it. But the rest of the fabric is fairly loose, which is actually fairly good in case if you have a pair of pants underneath, is not going to GeoInner penetrate, and it's not going to kind of mess up our simulation. So far, so great. Let's go to the next section and see how we can add buttons and extensions to our t-shirt. All right, let's add some trims at the end of the sleeve hole and the bottom of the shirt. Again, there are many ways of doing this. I'm going to show you 2 ways. Let's start with my preferred method. So that is to select a segment, right click on it, and go offset pattern outline. You can go default or right angled corner, which is going to extend it based on the contour. And then we have unfilled corner. We have talked about this in our previous lesson, so feel free to check that out. I'm just going to go with default corner, and I am going to extend, as you can see, the sleeve a little bit. Maybe 16 millimeter is good enough. And now all you need to do is just to connect these 2 dots or points with an internal line. You switch to edit pattern, right click and cut and sew. That's definitely a really good way to do the trim for the sleeve. Again, at any point of time, if you think the sleeve needs to be slightly higher, which I believe, looking at the reference, I think this needs to be higher. So 1, 2, I'm just going to bring it a little bit higher. 1, 2. And the beauty of it is, because we did a symmetry paste with sewing, it kind of did that for both sides. But just so you know, if you want to do it manually back in, I don't know, Marvelous Designer 4 or 5, you could actually go ahead and do something like that and then bring it to position using arrangement points and cut and sew. This is something that is also possible, but again, we have much more efficient tools these days, so this is not really that necessary. If I press simulate, you can see it simulates it. The only thing that we need to do, we need to sew the fabric so it's a perfect loop. So I'm gonna stop the simulation, go to segment sewing, click here and click here. And you can of course do that before you symmetry paste it. And that is done, of course, because it's been done. And there you have it. Let's do something really similar for the shirt. The shirt situation won't cross over because if you remember, this was a mirror paste, not symmetry with sewing. I have a tutorial on the difference between mirror paste, symmetry sewing, and instancing in case you're confused about them, so make sure to check that out. But for now, let's just use the old method that we talked about. So I can easily go in here and create something like that, and I can even just zoom in. You can get the length and be super accurate with it, but I don't think it's going to cause too much problem if you just eyeball it. So that to that, I'm gonna do the same thing here, just to have a little bit of detail. Now, the good thing about that, I can actually use this fabric and just mirror paste it. So mirror paste to the other side, so I don't need to kind of be mindful of the length, and just a segment sewing, a simple segment sewing. And what I can do, I can select this one here, bring up the arrangement points, and that can go in here, and I can just translate it down. So I can select this one, I'm just going to zoom in and just translate it down, and that should do the trick. The only thing is you need to sort of make sure to connect these two sides, so here to here, and let's segment so the other two ends as well, here to here, and simulate, and done. Excellent. So really up to you how you would like to have that design. I'm looking at my references, and I do have a few trims here and there, so why not? Not only that, but also it gives us an excuse to have top stitching. Once everything is done, we can basically offset internal lines and add top stitching to our shirt, something that we are going to do as well. Again, as usual, I'm going to select everything and change the particle distance to 13, because all the new ones that we created, they have the particle distance of 20 millimeters. I want maybe something around 15 to 13, and right at the end we can even lower it to something like 10 to get the ultimate result. All right, let's go to the next one, and in the next one we are going to explore how to do the buttons for this colorless shirt. To insert buttons, it's fairly straightforward. You just need to come up with your own style, and you need to do your homework, either look at your project brief, or if you're doing this just for fun, do your research. In this example, I've got 3 buttons with a bit of a stitching that is happening at the end of it. Very similar style, 3 buttons. There are different styles. For example, we've got 4 buttons and the type or shape of the stitching is different. We've got a quad with a cross right next to it. So there are a variety of styles to choose from, and it would be your discretion. A typical, very standard sort of Henley shirt would be 3 buttons with 2 rectangles at the end. What I'm going to pick probably would be 3 to 4 buttons with a stitching right at the end. We'll see how we go. So we need to pick 2 points and carve out the area that we have the buttons on, and have 1 layer for the bottom of the shirt and 1 layer for the top of the shirt, and do the stitching afterwards. So with the add point split line selected, I'm just gonna right click in here. Let's see, probably, I don't know, 30. Yeah, 30 would be a good number. So that's the first point. I'm just going to pick the same amount or same value, 30. Again, you can eyeball stuff. It's not really that crucial, but again, it's just force of habit. I always want to be accurate with everything. Internal line selected, so we are going to zoom back a little bit, select the internal line holding down shift, and maybe here would be good, and then here, and then we connect it to the other point. So that's what we have. I think we can go just a tad lower, so maybe, because if it's too short then you cannot fit 4. I'm hoping to fit 4, see what happens. If it's short enough, either I will extend this or I will fit 3. I don't have any set in stone sort of brief going on here. So my case is quite flexible. I'm gonna do an internal line like so. Zooming in, yeah, that should do the trick. And of course, it's time to cut it. So I'm gonna select all 3, right click, and cut. Selecting this guy, moving it up so I can kind of work with it a little bit. Probably don't need this point at any point of time. If I feel like I need it, then I can just insert it in no time at all. There's a bit of a slant going on, so I'm just going to fix that as well. Make sure it's all straight. Cool, excellent. So next is to duplicate it. I'm going to select that, copy, Control C, Control V. You don't need to do mirror paste or duplicate special. It's a bit of an overkill. Maybe you want to have a cross in here. Maybe you want to have 2 narrow rectangles. As a matter of fact, I think a cross would be nice, just to kind of emphasize on the stitching part to what we have. All right, that should do the trick. Let's do the stitching really quick, and then we can kind of shape that accordingly. I'm going to go into segment sewing. We want to segment sew this portion to this portion, bottom patch to bottom, and for this one I would like to do the same. So right patch to right patch and bottom to bottom. And because they're coming from the patch, they've got the right particle distance. So if I click on it, the particle distance is already set to 13, which is fantastic. I'm going to simulate, and we have something to start with. Of course, a lot needs to be done here, but I just want to get the kind of feel for it, get the look for it. Also, moving this down ever so slightly. It turned out we needed that kind of curve after all. Looks better. Now let's add buttons. Oh, by the way, I noticed that we did not stitch this part here. So let's create them really quick. Let's segment sew them. I'm going to really quickly do the segment sewing, right to right. And if I click, I've got something to start with. Move this ever so slightly like so. And I'm gonna do the same thing here, just to reposition it a little bit. I noticed that it's kind of closer to one side compared to the other side, and that hopefully should fix the situation. The little glitch that you see here will get fixed as soon as you insert buttons. All right, let's get to the buttons and buttonholes. I've got buttonholes selected. I'm going to add buttonhole. So I'm going to call this Handley buttonhole. Completely optional naming convention. For the color, I'm going to look at my references here, and what I have is actually fairly dark. So I may actually choose a very dark blue color, like so. So any buttonhole I create will be quite dark. Then I'm going to go to button and add a new button, and it's one of those cases, funny enough, that the actual default is very similar to what I have. So if I zoom in, you can see it's like a 4-hole type of button, and that's exactly that. I'm going to rename it Handley button or BTN. It really does not matter. For the color, I'm going to go with sort of a chromy looking type of color. Reduce the roughness a little bit, introduce just a tad of metalness. And for the type, I usually go with silk satin. That silk satin is really sort of reflective in here. Obviously, if you want to texture those buttons in the different application packages, you need to properly add a correct value of metalness. Right now, no biggie. I'm just going to move this one ever so slightly lower. Notice that it's a bit higher than the other one. Again, my OCD is kicking in. So for the radius of 20, I think that's a bit high, but let's insert buttons and see how we go. I tend to insert buttons not in 3D, but in 2D, because we're dealing with straight lines. It's much more accurate. I'm going to go in 3D mode and click on buttons. And let's start with the first one here. That's going to be the open one. Right off the bat, I see that the size is not too bad, but I can probably do better with maybe 14. Yeah, that's more like it. Also, maybe just a tad darker buttons. Cool. Now let's go with the next one. Next one, probably insert here. I noticed that I can only do 3, which is okay. I'm going to move this down ever so slightly, move this down also. If you want to be super accurate, you can just have some points in there or dots in there and have them as your guideline. I'm not going to be too crazy about it. I think that will get the job done. Let's go to buttonholes. The first buttonhole is going to be around here. Oh, and it's way too big. I should have known. So I'm going to go to buttonhole, select this one, and maybe 15. I've got 14 here, so 15 makes sense. I'm going to go and use the second one, and I'm using these guidelines just to roughly place the buttonholes in the same area. Little bit of inaccuracy is really not a big deal. Don't be too picky about it. No one's going to notice it really. I'm going to go and fasten these 2 buttons, leave the top one alone. So this one and this one. We talked about buttons in a separate session, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And yeah, a little bit stubborn, the middle one, but yeah, that looks good. I'm actually thinking that I might be able to fit 4. I don't know. I'm looking at some of these references and I might be able to actually fit 4. So what I can do is to stop the simulation and go into select and add the 4th one really quick. Okay, I think I need to go into, just going to go and select the buttons and see if I can just reduce their size a little bit. Yep, that they definitely look better. And yeah, that looks good actually. So now we have these buttons. And by the way, if you feel like it's a bit too thin for your taste, you can of course always go in here and go 2 by 2 for collision and rendering thickness. And then in here you can go ahead and enable thick surface like so. So it's a much better representation of what you are going to see at the end. So with that in mind and with all of these done, let's just add a little bit of trim for the around the neck. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at this trim right here, it's not on every single shirt, but some of these guys have actually that trim, and it's going to help us to kind of take the whole thing to the next level. So I'm not going to move to the next chapter. I'm going to just do it now since we've already done it really quick. I'm just going to go to edit pattern and select these guys, and I'm going to select these two. And I'm going to select this one. These are the ones that we need to extend. Ooh, for some odd reason, I lost my selection. Yep. So let's see how far are we going to add this. So I'm going to add it as pattern line, default corner, 5, maybe 6. Not quite sure. 6.5 may be a good number. So memorize this number 6.5 because we are going to use that to create internal lines here. So once you extend it with extend outline pattern, then you use internal line to connect this dot to this and this point to this, and then select these two guys and of course cut and sew. So that bit is done. I can sort of move this back to have that seamless looking shirt like so, something like that, which is good. Now for these guys, I cannot just do this to this because this is a curved line and I don't want to have a straight line that just doesn't look right. So my trick is, because I know how far I extended this, which was 6.5 millimeter, I can now offset as internal line 6.5 millimeter and it lines up perfectly. And that would be the line that I'm going to cut and sew, right? Hope it makes sense. I'm just going to do the same thing for the other ones really quick, probably shuffle around some of these panels as well and organize them. You can just follow along and continue. Excellent. So time to do a quick simulation and see how things are holding up. 2 areas I need to stitch, 2 teeny tiny areas. Probably to do that I need to disable thick surface. So these 2 areas are the areas that I need to stitch just to finish this part. So I'm gonna go segment sewing from here to here, very simple. And the other part is here, segment sewing here to here. I'm simulating it. Segment sewing this to this, and so segment sewing this to this, done. All right, that should do it for the trim. In the next chapter, which is our final one, I'm going to add top stitching. So let's finish this tutorial by adding some top stitches to our Henley shirt. All right, we've already done top stitching in our previous videos. Just to do a little bit of recap, you need to go to top stitch. Obviously, we need to define what type of top stitching we would like to do and what color, what would be the shape, the length, the thread thickness, so on and so forth. So I'm going to start with the color, which I'm going to go with a super dark color just to match the buttonholes that I have. Also, I'm not quite sure exactly how much or how far the offset is going to be. I'm going to start with 1.5. Usually 3 is way too much. And I need to think about what areas I need to offset. So I'm just going to go to edit pattern. I know for a fact that these areas are going to receive top stitching. At least the top layer is going to receive top stitching. I know that these two areas are going to receive top stitching. Let's actually select this area and this area. I'm going to go offset as internal line, and maybe 2 would be a good starting point for these guys. I'm going to start with these two, offset as internal line. 2 would be a good starting point, and of course the button part of the patch, internal line, and 2. Now I'm thinking about it, probably and this area we don't want because this will be placed on top of this area and we're not going to see the internal line here. So these are the things that you kind of need to work out before you sort of insert internal lines. All right, I've got few of them in place, and again, the good thing about top stitching is at any point of time, if you feel like you need more, then you add more. That's no problem at all. Let's actually establish the look of the top stitch, make sure that we have the right look. So I'm going to go to segment top stitch, and let's start with this little guy here. Just to establish the look, I'm going to zoom in just to see what we have. Yeah, right off the bat, I know that there should not be too much of an offset, so I'm just going to change the offset. Thread thickness, I'm going to increase that to something like 0.7. The space, I will reduce to something like 1, and length maybe to 2. Something like that should do the trick. I'm also going to reduce the black color. I don't want that to stand out too much, so something like that. Maybe a little bit of grayish color will do the trick. Going to kind of exaggerate the thickness just a tad. So these are all the compromises you need to do, and that will define how your top stitch will look eventually. Then after that point is easy. You just click on each internal line to finalize your top stitching. And again, if you realize that, for example, an area receives unnecessary top stitching, then you can easily just remove the internal line and it removes the top stitching all together. So I'm just going to go through the process and do that really quick. Excellent. So I'm zooming in and I'm actually fairly happy with the top stitching. Remember, it should not really caught your attention. It should not really stand out too much, especially for these type of t-shirts. It's not, the stitching is not too pronounced. If I move this guy here, you kind of barely see it. Now remember, for exporting your top stitches, you always need to kind of bump it up intentionally, exaggerate the size. But in Marvelous Designer, it's not going to be a huge problem. Also, a question I received a few lessons ago is why cannot see our top stitches? Usually when you simulate, the top stitching disappears, just so you know. But as soon as you stop the simulation, you can see that coming back. Now, at any point of time in here, you can just go and make necessary changes. Let's say you can say, all right, I need more visible top stitches, like so, and it sort of changes the look of it instantly, which is really, really, really cool. I'm just going to select everything and reduce my particle size to even a lower number, like 10. And again, a lower or fewer particle size will give us a much finer result. That should do it for this tutorial. Pretty much the workflow remains the same. If you want to change the style a little bit, if you want to add color, that color is going to be a simple 2D pattern that you will sew around the neck. If you want to have more buttons, then you will just change the size of this patch right here. If you want to turn this to a long sleeve instead of short sleeve, these are the patch responsible for it. You can just change the dimension or the length of each patch and get an instant result. So as you can see, once you reach a certain level, then it becomes actually quite easy to customize the look of your product or your garment. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much, guys, for tagging along and for staying that long. And I hope you use this workflow in your own projects. You can follow me on YouTube. This piece will be up on my Patreon as usual, so feel free to download that, tag along, follow along, and make necessary changes. Thank you very much again, guys, and until the next video, see you guys soon.